I was always musical, and that really led me in every direction in my life. I sacrificed in the beginning, made me work harder, and I always recorded my own music because nobody wanted to pay for it. Nobody was like, I'm gonna put my money behind women's music. So I worked with what I had, and I kind of transitioned into podcasting. There were, I don't think, any females podcasting. I'll be one of the first female podcasters. And I was like, great. When October 7th happened, and I was, as like everyone, completely shell-shocked, I showed people that it was deeply personal. Ultimately, I wanted something joyful that reflected how awesome it was to be Israeli and to be in Israel. The account ballooned, and we now have 260,000 followers on my beautiful land of Israel. We love our IDF. We're Zionistic and proud, and we're not interested in hate. The people who want the truth are going to find it. The people who want the lies, they're going to create it. I'm just who I am. I've been through a lot. I am the same person through all of this. And the Lubavitch Rebbe always said that Hashem protects Eretz Yisrael night and day, and that Israel is the safest place in the world. And as someone who's living here almost a decade, I will live and die on that hill. Guys, come home.
Thank you so much for clicking on this week's episode of The Proctor Effect. My guest today happens to be actually one of the other hosts of another Moral Edge show, Chanale. Chanale is a very, very special person. If you've listened to some of her episodes, you probably have a great understanding of who she is. But if you haven't listened, now after listening to this episode, you probably will understand a little more into how special Chanale is. So enjoy, sit back, buckle your seatbelt, and it's time to get into my episode with myself and Chanale. Welcome, Chanale, to the Weekly Squeeze. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Avi. Welcome to the show.
This is like everybody who's watching this episode. If you've ever watched either of Chanale's episodes or myself, you know that I run the Proctor Effect, Chanale runs the Weekly Squeeze, and this episode is very special because this is the first person, part of the Moral Edge, aside from Nisim, that I've had the pleasure to sit down and kind of hear your story.
Thank you. So, it's not often I get the opportunity. I'm usually on the other side of the table, so thank you for having me, Avi.
Hopefully you pass my quiz today and our test and all the interrogation questions I'm going to ask her. So
I think I'm up for the task.
Okay, let's run it. So everybody who knows you, who might be clicking on this, is like, I know Chanale, right? They probably think they have a good idea about your life. They've seen things on social media. And for even myself, right, we've only known each other for so long since the Moral Edge has come into
our lives.
Effect, exactly. So for me and for everybody that's listening to this, take us back to the beginning, right? The first 18 years of your life, give or take, of the beginning of when you grew up. I'm sure you had a lot of influential moments there because obviously we've had conversations before and I know a little bit about that. So take us through that in the beginning and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So first of all, because this is what I do, like this video. Okay.
And subscribe.
I can't start with my story. My story is so intertwined with my grandparents and their stories. In a nutshell, on my father's side, my grandmother's a Holocaust survivor. Her story is incredible. She is one of the only members of her family that survived. And she brought 10 beautiful children into the world. They joined the Chabad community, and I'm part of a very large, extended family that span the world with a lot of talent and a lot of passion and a lot of commitment to Jewish values and to Israel and to everything that the Jewish people find important and are trying to rebuild after the Holocaust. On my mother's side, I like to say I have tiger blood. I'm Chabad through and through. Yeah, and my education was always very thorough, and we were, taught about the value of being a chassid to the Lubavitch Rebbe, and again, a lot of talent. My grandmother was a Yiddish poet, and her poems were featured in the back page of the Allgemeiner Journal for years, and then later put into a book. She was also an artist, and she would paint her own beautiful pictures of different scenes in Judaism, and she would give them to people who gave tzedakah to the yeshiva in Montreal. And there's hundreds of Rebbetzin Sarah Simonovich's artworks that she painted because people gave, and this was her passion, and she was artistic. And so we grew up like very much aware that we had gifts and we had purpose, and we all could live out life in a full way and be great people. So that's my backstory. I was lucky enough to grow up in Miami Beach, which for people watching is as awesome as you think. Like, growing up in Miami Beach is actually a superior life to growing up in Muncie or New Jersey. Like, it is. It's just, the weather's great, aside from a few life-changing hurricanes over the years. But we grew up in a Chabad community. There were lots of close, like neighbors in our community that we were related to and friends with, and we went to the same school. And there was like it was like a Hamish, cozy vibe. I don't know if you know the history of Miami Beach.
Definitely not holding.
Okay. Sure. So people watching there's a lot of amazing Chabad families that planted roots there in the 60s and 70s. And until today, I mean, because of that, the Chabad school now has thousands of kids. And when I grew up, there were 7 kids in my class, and it was 3rd and 4th grade combined. Wow. So those were the old days. That was when Florida was, they're still small. There was no movie theater. There was no Lincoln Road. There were no people coming for Labor Day and into our pizza stores and everything. It was just us. And that was never enough for me because I always just wanted more.
Imagine.
Yes. So my childhood was great. Like we went to the beach on Sundays and we were close to my grandparents, and my maternal grandparents would come from Crown Heights and visit and come for Yom Tov. And being Chabad, that was our childhood. Until the Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away on Gimel Tammuz, our entire life revolved around being Lubavitch. That was it. That was the be-all and end-all. We were constantly in Crown Heights. I remember every single Yom Tov, every single Chag being in my grandparents' basement, and there were so many grandchildren, and we were the Florida grandchildren, and we were wearing our itchy tights and our wool sweaters, and it was so freezing, and we would sit in our bubby's sukkah, and my grandfather, we would wait for my Zaidi to come home, but he was always in 770, because that was for a bring-in, and everyone was drunk. My childhood was that everyone was drunk in Crown Heights. So it was very thrilling for me, and I grew up on that energy. I remember going into 770 on Simchas Torah and feeling the energy, the crowd. You know those videos you see when like sardines, I was there.
Wow.
And everyone's connection to the Rebbe was so tight and intense and close. My grandfather was involved in securing passports so that the Lubavitcher Rebbe's mother could come to America. Like that's the role our family played in the growth of Lubavitch in America. So that was that was the basis, I would say, of my childhood. And then everything changed. There was Gimel Tammuz, and it was a reality check in a sense. And I can't say that anything specifically changed because Lubavitchers kind of just kept, we didn't have a new Rebbe. It wasn't like Lubavitch changed. We just kept being Lubavitch without there being a Rebbe. By the way, you always say you don't interrupt. You really don't interrupt.
Yeah, I don't interrupt. Obviously, I'm here to hear your story. And because, by the way, for those that want to understand what we're talking about, before this podcast, I said to Chana, I'm like, listen, my style is that I like to hear your story. So I'm going to interject. I'm going to ask you a question now. Okay. Fine. And now that you say that, so this whole Crown Heights not movement, honestly, the Lubavitch Hasidus had so much of your foundation, and that impacted you tremendously. And obviously that became like your mahus, like who you were. So I know that obviously a lot of people that probably are listening to this know you from Israel advocacy, but also music. And that's a huge part of you. So take me through that. Like, how did you kind of, from your childhood years, did you always have an interest in music? Was that something you wanted to do? Take me into that aspect of your life.
Okay. So because we had such a exciting childhood, of course, I went to summer camp in the Catskills. I went to Camp Amuna. Shout out to Camp Amuna. And for years, I was the head of choir. I was the head of production, and I sang. And for those of you who know, my great aunt from my father's side, she came to England before the Holocaust. There was the
Kinder transport?
Yes, the Kinder transport. Thank you. And she ended up being, she is the first religious Jewish woman to produce music in America. And she produced the Mitzvah Tree, which was a record, these records that we grew up on. And they had I'm a little hunk of tin and all these Jewish songs. So I was just musically inclined, and I had some piano lessons, and my mother loved to sing, and my mother played classical music. So in camp, I was the Florida girl all year. And then I would come to, I was in Miami all year, and then I would come to Camp Amuna. And summer after summer after summer, I wrote the plays, I was in production, and I was always the mother of the main character in the main play. And I would have to wear a gown that belonged to Rebbetzin Hecht, the grandmother, the director of the camp. this like frumpy gown that she wore to one of her grandchildren's weddings. And I would sing. I had a solo, I had a song, and I would sing an entire song, and everyone was quiet. I was like, I could get used to this. So yes, I was always musical. And that really led me in every direction in my life, because after I would come home from camp, it would be such a letdown to go back to this small, quiet Miami life. So my parents suggested, when I was 13, that I go to Montreal. My father's from Montreal, and we have family there on both sides. And that's what I did. I ended up living in my aunt's house. She had 14 children, Kanina Hara of her own. Till this day, she's one of the most influential people in my life. I love her. High regards. My Aunt Rachel.
Hopefully she listens.
Yes, of course she's going to listen. And I lived in her house for 3 years, and I went to school in Montreal. And even though Montreal wasn't as big as Beis Rivka in Crown Heights, it was still a pretty big school. So I was part of production there, and I was part of the choir, and I learned French, and I was friends with Moroccan girls, and had a lot of freedom. Because when you're 13 and your parents are in Miami and you're living in your aunt's house and she has 14 kids and you have a train card and you're Chanale and you're independent, you go. So I always was independent. I would go on the train. I would go to the music stores. I would go out on my own, do shopping. And I, from a very young age, knew who I was and felt comfortable, navigating the world alone. Yeah. So
first of all, the fact that you left your family to then go to Canada, to move in with 14 people, that's
it was a beautiful, clean house, and it was very comfortable. And I've learned so much. I run my house a lot like my aunt and my mother does, but yeah, she managed very well.
That's awesome.
And it was a really Hasidic home, like that. My uncle spoke Yiddish, and it was and all the children in Kanai Nahar are either Shluchim or Lubavitch, and it's really
honestly pretty wild. So now that you kind of move away from your family, you get your independence, you're kind of finding yourself a little bit, right? So you get into music. As you were saying before, you go to your camps and you have like your moments where you're like, wow, like maybe I could do something. I have a talent. So take me through what happens from here. You move away from your family, okay? And this is essentially probably the stage of your life where you really have to grow up at a 13-year-old age, right?
Yeah, I don't think I have an old soul, but I learned to be responsible. I remember, I'll share a quick story. I remember once I had $100 on me, and $100, even though it was Canadian, it was $100. And it fell out of my pocket. And I was really angry at myself. And I called my father, and I was like, I'm such an idiot. And he was like, it's only $100. So does it mean it's only $100? So he said, your value is so much more. Like, why would you, like, you're not an idiot. It's only $100. For me, the $100 has no value if my daughter thinks that she's an idiot. You know what happens? Mistakes happen. So yeah, I learned valuable lessons at an early age. But just to get into the music real quick, from Montreal, I went to Kfar Chabad for seminary, and I brought my guitar, and I met a lot of my lifelong friends there. And following that, usually you go to another year of SEM. So I went to Crown Heights, and I was kind of entering the shidduchim system. And one jolly day, the principal of the school came into the seminary classroom, and she said, we have an opportunity for one of the students to go to Hawaii. And in Hawaii, you can be the teacher of the shluchim's children. You can homeschool them.
Wow.
And who's interested? And I was like, me, back row, me here. So off to Hawaii I went.
You're kidding. For how long?
For almost a year. And I taught the shluchim's kids. And that was also a huge eye-opening experience, because again, we lived in an apartment, the three of us, we were independent to do whatever we want. They weren't watching over us, the shluchim. We just showed up, we taught them. And it's funny because years later, I taught their son, and he's now the shliach in Maui, and he was on my podcast.
Wow. Wow. Full circle. So I was in Hawaii, and then my life just was always interesting in that way. And after Hawaii, I was thinking, okay, what am I doing now? I'll go back home. Let me go back home. And I went back home and to Miami, and it turns out Miami was as boring as I left it. No offense. It was great to live at home, and I taught in preschool, and I actually ended up being a teacher in first grade in the same school I grew up in. And that's when I got into recording, because I had a lot of free time, and it wasn't like so exciting like New York. And I bought a little recorder, a multi-track disc recorder. And I started, and my concept was like, hey, I don't need a choir. I could just multiply my tracks, play my guitar, and tap on the table, and I have like a little thing going, and then I can make music. Cool. Now, this was before computers. Like, nobody was recording on computers. So I go into Sam Ash, and I open up a credit card, and I just buy some gear, and I come home, and then I'm like,
if I want to record a piano, I'm not going to go mic my parents' baby grand. I should probably get a digital piano. So I bought a digital piano. And then I'm like, I need a decent mic. So I buy a mic. And then this was before a mic stand. I just taped the mic to the wall, you know? And I started recording in my room. Again, before the internet.
Wild.
I had to go to the library to figure out how to use it. I had to go on internet forums and post that I'm like Joe from Georgia and I have a question about my setup, and random people would answer and help me walk through it. Now, the frustration was unparalleled. I cried through the first dozen recordings that I ever did, and probably most of them on some level. But I managed to get some recordings done. And I shared them on discs and I gave them to friends. And before I knew it, I got like a message from a cousin who had a Chabad house. She's like, we're doing this event for women called Women in Song. Why don't you come sing? I was like, yeah, cool. Like I had my playbacks. And I put on some big brown frumpy gown, maybe 19 years old. I got on stage. I sang 3 songs. And everyone loved it. And again, I was like, oh, this could be something, Yeah, music took I have, it's long.
No, there's a lot to touch on about music, but I want to get to what happens after and everything.
So much more.
So at this stage of your life, obviously, okay, you're 19, you begin to kind of get your feet into music. Yes. And obviously what's interesting is, for people that might be listening to this that are not so familiar with like the Jewish world and crowd, is that women singing in the Jewish world is kind of like more on the quiet side. Because
when I started, it was taboo. My cassettes were on the bottom row of every Judaica store. There were no images on the cover and nobody wanted to invest in it. Don't forget, people didn't have that many, people weren't listening to they didn't have earbuds and beats. So music was playing in cassette players in people's houses and cars, and Kol Isha was a big deal. So I faced a lot of pushback and I resented it in the beginning because the advertisers didn't want to feature my CD on the same poster as Avram Fried's new release because my music was for some reason less worthy. So that was a huge part. And until today, one of the scandals that I went through with social media is when I called out Ami and Mishpacha magazine and I was like, why are you guys erasing women? We're past that. We're at a point that we recognize that social media has changed things. Women are online. I'm not saying to plaster their faces, and I'm not an advocate of that, but when you have a Purim feature and you blur the face of a child with Down syndrome, it's like you've crossed the line. And it really triggered me because I sacrificed in the beginning and I took it and I said, you know what? Women's faces are not on CDs. I respect that. You want to put my CDs on the floor? I respect that. I was grateful. Sameach Music gave me a chance to begin with. Mm-hmm. And also it made me, I wanted to earn a place. It made me work harder. And I always recorded my own music because nobody wanted to pay for it. Nobody was like, I'm going to put my money behind women's music. There was almost like this, like, you're insignificant. Your market is tiny. I'm not, you want to do it on your own. Wow. So that, until today, that is one of the reasons that I spoke out about the extreme erasure of women. It's a conversation to be had. It's not black and white.
1,000%. And what I'm so curious about right now is because if people are picking up on this, okay, you're 19.
I'm still 19. Yeah.
Not now. At this stage of your life, okay, you're 19, you're beginning to get into music. And obviously, as you said, your CDs are on the bottom of every single Jewish store. And it's a little taboo within the Jewish community. At this stage of your life also, as you mentioned, you were beginning to get into shidduchim. Mm-hmm. For those that don't know, dating, right? So take me through that. Was that something you were worried about? And then kind of, I want to get more into your personal life. What happens from there in terms of, dating and when did you get married?
So fast forward 19 to about 23, I didn't get married. I dated here and there. And I mostly spent time traveling and singing. I recorded 2 albums, Sameach Music Distributors. They actually distributed Avram Fried at the time. They reached out to me. They said, women are calling and asking if we have the Chanale recordings, and we don't. So I said, oh, you want my recordings? I have 8 of them. And they're like, yeah, it's going to sell. So they put out 1 album and cassette. And then he said, but you have to put out another one. So I took the money that came in from the first album and I bought myself a computer. And that opened up a whole new world of anxiety and aggravation. I downloaded from Napster a recording software and I learned how to record. And I bought a keyboard and my music got better. It was before auto-tune. I'm not the greatest singer in the world. I'm a creative. I'm a songwriter. I'm a musician. That's where my passion lies. But again, I didn't have a budget to bring in anything else. So I worked with what I had. So fast forward, I'm working in New York because, I did my 2-year stint at home. I love you, Monta, but I'm going to Crown Heights now to find a man, okay? So I come to Crown Heights and I start working at the OK Herscher. And I was the secretary to a family member, Rabbi Krinsky, and he would go to Asia, and he would go to all the different kosher factories and give these ingredients, all these, ingredients of ingredients, hechsherim. And I was the secretary. I would plan his trips, and I also worked for the Department of Mislabeled Products, because OK is so often, it's a copyright, OK, the hechsher. But people assume like you put a K on a product and then you want to circle it to highlight it. A lot of time the graphic artist makes the mistake, and then food has to be recalled. And I was in charge of recalling those items. Anyways, fun times.
Fun times.
So I'm working at OK Herscher, and then I got an opportunity to work on 47th Street in Manhattan. And that's when my whole life changed. Take
me through that. So what happens there? When do you meet your husband? And kind of take me through that if you choose to.
Yes, I'll take you through. All good things, like Olaf says. So I was performing a lot. I was in Chile, Colombia, Barranquilla. I think I stopped in Bogota, Alaska, South Africa, Australia, Sydney, and Melbourne. I just had a lot of great opportunities, and even just across America. And I was singing all the time and writing songs and performing my work, and I was fulfilled and happy. And Hashem sent me the only person I wasn't related to, my husband. Okay, and he was a Sephardic and a Bukhari Jew from Israel, and he was everything that my parents did not think was the right fit for me, as you could imagine. And in short, it was a very challenging time for me because in my mind at the time, this was my basher. And I was, the oldest daughter, and I had a rebellious streak. And like I said, I was very independent. And I didn't have the emotional, the emotional maturity, really, to be able to step back from the situation, remove myself from it, and give it the time it needed to develop in a more healthy way. So we'll leave it at that. But in very short, I came to Eretz Yisrael with my then husband, and now he's my ex-husband, but my ex-husband, and we got married here in Israel, and my parents were not at the wedding. So
I have to ask on that. So being the oldest daughter, going through a little bit of a rebellious stage, did you feel like bad? Do you feel like you were letting your parents down? And then what was that like? Like, do you still talk to your parents based off of that going on? Take me
first of all, I have the most amazing parents in the world. I love you, Monta.
Baruch Hashem.
Love you. Okay. Now, I grew up fiercely aware of my identity. I was a Lubavitcher. I was a singer. I was a strong Chabad woman. I had a message. I had an audience. I had a career. And my future was bright, And I really, really felt like nothing could go. How could God not have a great plan in store for me? I'm like such a good person. Of course this is going to work out. So, sometimes someone comes into your life and maybe it's not the right fit, but you can, if anyone can make it happen, I can make it. I can make this work. And also, I love all the Jews. I love the Sephardic Jews and the Israeli Jews and the Bukharian Jews and all those things about he's not your background and different traditions and all that stuff. I was like, no, maybe for simple people, but we'll make it work. I love this part of the challenge. I was up for it. So we got married, and to say it was not a challenging time. Of course it was, but you can't remove a finger from a hand. And my parents, they understood that I loved him and I wanted to be with him. And they did everything within their power after we were married to bring us close and to reconcile with us and to create a healthy relationship. And for me, that the time that the chasm, I would call it, as intense as it was, like it's a distant memory because the years of good memories that have replaced it, like I completely focus on that. So for me, the whole experience of getting married wasn't necessarily a negative thing. It wasn't a negative thing. And I was happily married for the most part for 20 years. So, and a big part of why I was so happily married was because I did what I loved and I was still singing and working on my career and I started traveling again. And then when I came back after getting married, I came back to Putzlaretz. I was nervous. Like, would they take me back? I'm married to someone who looks different and he's not, the Chabad type. And lo and behold, people are like, we like you for you.
Wow.
Like, it doesn't matter, like we love you. We love your music. We love your message. We love what you stand for and what you represent. And I was always consistent. I never lied to my audience. I was always transparent with them. What you see is what you get.
First of all, it is true. And thank God I came on the show. But what I think is so special is that, at the end of the day, like you, as you said a second ago, when I asked you the question about your parents, is that your relationship with them today is it's there. You have one and it's special. And there are a lot of stories where it goes the opposite direction and they don't have it. And I think that obviously it speaks to your character and hopefully your parents also. But I want you to take me and the listeners now through, you come back to America, as you said a second ago, you're married to a guy that in the Chabad standard is not the typical guy you marry. And then you're hoping people take you back. So take me through kind of what happens once you come back to America. And then I know what happens, how you slowly got back to Israel.
I want to just dive in, go a little bit deeper into what it feels like to belong to a community that when you choose to step out, it's so, and there were people who tried. There were people who reached out and wanted to make me, and told me, of course we're your family, but we just, this shidduch is just it's not working for us. It was extremely painful. And I don't think it's the community's fault. I just think that's when you're a part of a system and you reject, in a sense, what the system is offering and you choose something else, our natural inclination is to question the person who's leaving, because then we have this self-doubt, like, what, we're not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't feel that. Then I just felt hurt. Because I remember thinking, I'm the same person. My values are the same. I haven't changed. My music is the same, but we tend to judge people from the outside. And I felt, you look at a person, you look at their partner and you assume, especially I'm a role model, I'm a singer, I'm influential. So those things, they were very, very painful. And I wrote about it in my songs and I didn't speak about it much because I have 4 beautiful children and I have so much to say about that. And I want to move on to the decision to make Aliyah, which was so tied into them, and how I ended up kind of moving from the music into podcasting and advocacy for Israel.
So now that you've taken your family, you got married in Israel, you moved back to America and you went to Crown Heights and then you went to Florida. So take me through that.
So I got married in Israel, moved to New York, continued to sing. The community was amazing. I recorded another 2 albums, I think. I started working with Tovito on the Torah Treasure projects, on their videos. Tovito's it's an app for Jewish kids where they can watch all kinds of kosher media for a subscription fee that their parents pay. So I started working with that, and my creative expertise was used on a lot of the projects. And thank God, I really established a musical career while I was having kids. And I felt like the past was the past. Like, thank God, yes, it was a challenging thing. I didn't have a wedding and I didn't have a Sheva Brachas. I didn't have an engagement party and I didn't have presents. I didn't have a sheitel. I didn't have anything.
Wow.
But I had a family that loved me. I had a community to come home to that offered me work. And, as Jews, we believe in tshuva and second chances, and I was going to take my second chance, So I kind of just picked up where I left off, and at some point, I got tired, fed up with the snow and the cold in New York. I was not cut out for it, and I was raising little kids, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to do this, but should we go to Miami? And for me, Miami was like, my childhood was dead. Like Shabbosim, on Shabbat, we had nothing to do. It was too hot to walk to friends. The neighbors were spread apart. They're big properties, and people don't live in apartment buildings like they live here. There's not kids running around. So for me, I was like, do I want to do that to my kids? Take them out of the shtetl environment? But I I knew that things had changed. Like the community grew tremendously, and there was a completely different structure available for Jewish kids now. And ultimately, we decided to move to Florida, and we moved to Hollywood, and life was great. You know, my kids were in a good school, and I had a house and a pool and a Costco card and a garage, and I was living the dream. I'm living in Florida, where the weather is sometimes magnificent, sometimes gross, but usually okay. Close to my parents. My kids are in a great school. I'm a music teacher. I'm more a Chanale. I'm with my guitar. I'm involved in my music. Like life really is, perfect.
So that's where I have to cut you off, because I mean, Hollywood, Florida, phenomenal Jewish community, a phenomenal place. But if people put two and two together, you had a phenomenal life, but now you live in Israel. So I want you to kind of take me through what happens. You move to Florida. Baruch Hashem, things are epic. You have a pool, you have a house, as you just said. What begins to have that shift of music to, I think the stage in your life where you kind of got into Israel advocacy.
Yeah.
And then what led you to end up coming back
So
here?
it's like, it just kind of, the story just unplayed. Like some things just unfold, and you look back, you're like, well, that makes perfect sense. Trump and Hillary ran for president. I was glued to the news, obsessed with what was going on. I didn't miss a tweet. I was obviously rooting for Trump, and then I was freaking out, and the news, everything was so up in the air. And I really felt like our lives depended on it, because that was the energy, that was the intensity of the race. And so here I am living in South Florida, and Florida's a red state, and I wanted to make sure that we won. There was rumors that maybe it was going to be purple and blue. And I was in a panic. And I remember thinking, what is going to actually happen if Hillary becomes president and the Democrats win? South Florida is going to be flooded with Muslims. And we're already in Trump town, because the community or the crowd or the Florida right-wing Republican MAGA, they're wife beater, tattoo, Jew hating anti-Semites. Okay, so I'd be out and about and realize here in the group, the town that I grew up in, I'm uncomfortable in my tichel. I'm uncomfortable that I'm obviously a Jew, because this guy looks like he wants to, and this woman in the hijab is not happy. And I was like, how is this happening? It's happening. I'm like, it's happening. And I'm gonna be a fool not to acknowledge it. So I turned to my husband, who's an Israeli, and I said, what do you think we go back home? And he's like, to your mother's house? No. I'm like, no, to Israel. It's like, really? And it's funny, because he was happy in America, but a Jew always yearns to come back home. So it wasn't that hard to convince him. And as soon as I did and got into the mode, nefesh b'nefesh, and I got into it, I'll say two things. First of all, I told my parents last. Wow. I told everyone and their grandmother, I think my entire Instagram audience, and then telling my parents was the hardest part. And I wrote my 7th album. So while I was packing and preparing and watching Jamie Geller videos and Tova in Israel and Aliyah and crying and arguing with Nefesh B'Nefesh and getting my apostles and my birth certificates and going to it was, all that stuff. And I was on taking care of it. I started recording. I had a home studio. I was working on the Beis Yaakov play, and I started recording this album. And after I recorded the Beis Yaakov Girls, I remember thinking, I need to cleanse. I need a palate cleanse. If I hear one more production song, I need to record my own songs. And I recorded, a couple of my songs, We Are the Jews, and then I Am the Land. And I started working with another producer for the first time. I put some money into my album. And as I packed to leave, and then eventually told my parents, the album came out on Spotify, and that was a big deal. This is already 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. It took time. I think it took 3 months until they approved it. And the album actually was released on the day I made Aliyah, and it was called I Am the Land. Wow. And I remember going to the Kotel and being like, hey guys, I had 4 Instagram followers. Hey guys, I Am the Land is out. I'm so happy. I'm here in Israel. And I remember thinking how am I going to promote this album if nobody even knows I exist? They knew I was Chanale the singer, but it wasn't on social media. I was like, that's it. Wow. I'm going to have to share my entire life here in Israel if I want to sell this album, which is what I did. I started sharing everything, and I would wake up in the morning, I kid you not, for 3 years, all I did was tour Israel. I would get up, people were like, do you have a job? I'm like, nope. Do you have no? My kids were in Gan till 3, 4 o'clock. I didn't speak language. I wasn't going to be a secretary or a receptionist. I would literally open up the map in the morning and be like, I am going here. And I went to mini Israel and I went to every museum. And then I would I'm like, I am going to Zichron Yaakov. How am I getting there? I'm not sure. Often my husband would drive me and knock on people's doors and go into their gardens and just explore Israel and get to know the people and see the land and fall in love with it. You cannot have a relationship with Israel if you don't explore it in an intimate way, if you don't learn its nuances, its curves, its colors, and its smells. That's what love is. And for me, as a Florida girl, the only way for me to fall in love with Israel would be to go out there. And that's what I did. I started posting on Instagram, like, okay, and I would say today, and let's say the image would be me milking a cow. Where am I milking a cow? I don't know. I ended up in a milk farm in some kibbutz that, where I also will show you how they make furniture because the whole community works together, whatever. And every community had a story to be told. Did you know that 10 minutes from where we live, there's an entire Indian kibbutz? Well, I don't know if it's a kibbutz, a yeshuv, a settlement.
Interesting.
And everyone there is from India. And they're the nicest people, and they have one of the most beautiful shuls. And I walked around there, and then they invited me in, and I had a coffee, and I learned about Indian Jews. And they have a beautiful or whatever, like when you come into the cities, they have like every city has this monument or some sort. Mm-hmm. It's like colorful bicycles, spray painted. So for me, learning about the different communities of Israel really made me into the Sabra that I am. And for people who are commenting, we release some of these episodes and I speak about being a Sabra. Mm-hmm. I'm not just some American, Jap that landed here. And I have spent I'm not saying I'm an IDF soldier, but I have been in the
trenches,
in the boondocks of this country. And I've loved every single second of it.
So to that point, I have to ask, because one thing I'm sure your listeners know this stuff, is that once you obviously come into the public light, there sometimes will be a lot of attention, positive and negative, that comes with it. So for you, now that you come to Israel, you're touring the land, you're having a phenomenal time, and now you're documenting your experience here, and you're getting to see, as you said, Israel on an intimate level, which is the best way to build a relationship. What happens there in terms of when do you start getting all the hate, the public hate in your career?
Well, I never got hate. I only got love. Everyone loves Chanale. It was never hate. I'm not a hateful person. I don't put out things that are negative or controversial. What happened was I did at some point realize I'm not going to be singing as much here anymore, if at all. And I kind of transitioned into podcasting. It was getting popular, and there were, I don't think, any females podcasting. I was like, great. I was one of the first singers. I'll be one of the first female podcasters. And I started recording a podcast called The Weekly Squeeze with a friend, and then I ended up doing it solo, and I had guests, and I spoke about my love of the land, and I was passionate. And when there were terrorist attacks, I cried on my show, and I showed up, and I grieved publicly, and I showed people that it was deeply personal. And I remember listening to Ari Fold, Olav Shalom, when he had a podcast, and he influenced me to make Aliyah. And I wanted to feel that passionate about something. So I started podcasting on a regular basis. And, when you're podcasting, you're putting your opinion out to the world. And there was a lot of pushback. Like I said, the issue with the erasure of females in media, that was one issue. And I don't want to go into great detail, but there was another controversy when I spoke about a wedding. I don't even know if you could call it a wedding, a celebration of something that I thought was clearly not kosher, that was being marketed as kosher. And I spoke about it, and I got a lot of hate, and I was so surprised. And I wasn't. On the one hand, I said what I thought was my truth, and what I thought was a lot of people's truth. On the other hand, when you're living in a world where the only thing that really matters is how people feel, sure. Was I sensitive to how people feel? No. Was I thinking about how I felt? Yes. And I was indignant and upset that my kids would have to be exposed to this. And I felt this, that, or the other. Sure. You're not supposed to give tochacha from that perspective, from that position. Okay? You're supposed to give tochacha from a place where you are not. Your ego is not there. Mm-hmm. So that was my mistake. I should have taken time to be able to present it in a way that it wasn't personal. But I took it personally. I'm a Yid. I take Hashem personally, So I was horrified actually at the when you say hate, I mean, just the audacity of people to just say things that were so cruel. And did I take it personally? No. Did it stop me from sharing my opinion? No, it didn't. And I think the fact that when I got married, being that it was such a public thing at the time, it prepared me in a sense for this, because I remember thinking at the end of the day, it hurts, it's humiliating, private things are being exposed, people are talking about parts of you that you don't want them to, right? Mm-hmm. But two things. First of all, being shamed or ashamed publicly, it could be really cleansing. It can really help you refine yourself. And it's a test from Shemayim.
So can I ask on that?
Yeah.
So going through that, making your podcast and then getting all this attention, and as you just said, it's a little bit of a cleansing. Did you get what was that breaking point for you? Did you have one where you're like, I want to switch up kind of what I'm doing?
No, but I remember with Candace Owens, I was also called out about that, because people are like, why are you supporting an anti-Semite? Why are you giving her oxygen? I'm like, first of all, I'm in the podcast business. It's good for business. What do you mean, why? Why is the letter before Z? That's why. Because it's Candace Owens. I'm going to put her on my show. That's it. Unless she's holding a swastika, let me hear what she has to say. And I enjoyed the conversation with her. And you can watch it. And I looked back at it recently and I was like, this is actually pretty fair. Now, what happened to her? I don't know. Okay. Anti-Semitism is a mind virus. Once you catch it, it's over. Okay. So she caught the mind virus. Hasta la vista. It was nice to know you. But I was criticized for that. And listen, when people criticize, most often it comes from a place of insecurity. I know that, that's just the reality. And that's it. We have to, sometimes it's just this and a little time. At the end of the day, we're all completely involved in our own personal affairs, and there's only so much time we can dedicate to other people's dramas. So things feel so intense when you're in them. And I'll tell anyone who had any experience with being embarrassed publicly or things being exposed or something being shared that you didn't want to, dig deep. Ask yourself how things could have been different. We all have a certain amount of control in what ultimately gets released. And maybe deep down, there was a part of you that thought it would be okay if that was heard or seen or known. And if you're deeply ashamed of it, ask yourself why. And secondly, just, don't take yourself that seriously. You don't matter that much. There's bigger celebs than you, and just focus inward, and people forgive and forget. So I have no resentment to anyone, no one in the world.
I completely hear that. So what I think is also interesting about what you've done, obviously at this point, you're in Israel, you're touring the land, you have your podcast, and you're getting all this attention from people, good, better or worse, put it that way. And your page on Instagram that I've personally seen, your beautiful land of Israel, my beautiful land of Israel, to call it that. What sparked you to start that? And it grew very quickly.
Yeah.
So take me through that experience.
Okay. So I started with Instagram, and then I was promoting my own stuff, and October 7th happened. And I was, as like everyone, completely shell-shocked from the enormity of it all. And I'm a creative. I need to channel my energy. It was not the time to record songs. It was not the time to sing. There's a time to sing, and there's a time not to sing, and there's a time to mourn and a time to celebrate. And I was like, how am I going to channel this energy? And I started posting on Instagram. I opened up a page, My Beautiful Land of Israel, and I started sharing joyful things, not clickbait, not what's it called, gory things, and all kinds of stuff that were designed to shock, and that's fine. There's a space for that too, and we could talk about the details of Hasbara. But ultimately, I wanted something joyful that reflected how awesome it was to be Israeli and to be in Israel. And it just, I was consistent, and I posted, sometimes a few times a day, despite what was going on. I was like, this page is going to be positive. And I remember when I shared, and listen, you share the reality. I shared a video of Beit Shemesh kids running from a missile, and I was walking my dog with her pink tail, and I was running into the shelter with my dog. And the video got like 21 million views and like 300,000 likes and hundreds of thousands of hate comments from people all around the world saying that Magia Lahem, they deserve it. And I was like, this was the first time something went viral in a negative way. The account ballooned, and we now have 260,000 followers on My Beautiful Land of Israel. And we continue to, promote all the good things that are happening here. We love our IDF. We're Zionistic and proud, and we're not interested in hate. And I am, you could say whatever you want. I've read some of the comments on some of these episodes so far, and the haters are out with their fangs bared, but it only makes me want to continue to do this. Like I am sharing my reality. If this doesn't speak to you, you're in a different reality. That's fine. You don't have to like it, but that doesn't mean that this isn't the truth.
Right.
Yeah. So the advocacy, as far as that goes, the page grows, and Instagram is like a calling card. You say, "Oh, it's my Instagram." Oh, really? And you start getting invitations and getting involved in different organizations and fundraising. Through the Instagram, I fundraised $200,000 from people all over the world who threw money at the IDF at post October 7th. So I realized the power of the tool. But again, I just kept it positive. No advertisements. It was just all Israel all the time. So now that the page is so big, it brings me all these opportunities. I start attending all these events. I joined this Intel WhatsApp chat, and I'm part of a community of the most incredible people. Who, between the 700 or so people in this Intel chat, we reach hundreds of millions of people. I'm talking about X accounts that reach millions of people, organizations, websites, mailing lists. We have lawyers, heads of NGOs, everyone in the pro-Israel advocacy arena. And it's a space where we can talk about what's happening right now and say, okay, this is happening. How are we going to, and I hate the word defend Israel, but how are we going to get ahead of the story and post the truth? Why? Because the people who want the truth are going to find it. Mm-hmm. The people who want the lies, they're going to create it. The people who want the truth are going to find it. So at least let's prepare it. So that's what we do. We get ahead of the stories. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of times when we're like ripping our hair out of our heads. Why is this the direction of the narrative? We're trying so hard to be transparent, and sometimes there are sticks in our wheels. Unfortunately, we have people who work against us, and we can get into that. We're not going to get into that now. But my point is, there's always this drive to continue this important work. And I don't care how many people want to criticize it. It is worthy and commendable work. And I tremendously value, people should only understand the incredible things that the advocacy community, and these are not necessarily religious people, but they're Zionist, and they're going to fight for Israel. If it means spending 24 hours on their computer in the sewage on X, that's what they're going to do. And for me, I'm very, very, very much inspired. So I think ultimately, when I look back now and I see my music career and my Chabad childhood and how it all kind of brought me to being the person I am today, and how I use the talents God gave me. I'm not singing, but the power of the gab. I have my own show now here. I mean, it's a kind of a spinoff of the Weekly Squeeze, but it's a great honor to be able to speak to all of you and share, our ideas here and our conversations. But I'm just who I am. I've been through a lot, and not everything I've done succeeded. Most things have, but ultimately, it wasn't easy. It was not easy, and I have had a lot of dark moments and a lot of personal challenges. And I know that people were surprised to hear that I'm not married now, and it's a big change. But I'm still Chanale, and I always was, and that's really, I think, what it comes down to. I am the same person through all of this. There were no big transitions for me. You're not going to meet me today and be like, wow, I don't even recognize. No, you're going to be like, you literally are the same person you were when you were 5. Why? Because I had a very strong sense of identity then. I had, thank God, a lot of role models, and I always knew what my purpose was. So did I make mistakes? Yes. Did things get out of control here and there? Yes. But ultimately, I'm so proud of the work that I'm doing. And yeah. You
first of all, I have to say, you should be very proud, obviously. And it's a pleasure to have you part of the Moral Edge team and to hear your story of obviously everything you went through. But the thing that I take from what you just said is that through thick and thin, you're the same person. And it's I respect a lot and really just what you've had to go through, because being in the public eye and having to get all that attention positive and negative, right? It's a lot, you know, and like the fact that you're still here, you're still, you know, this is a new venture.
What do you mean still here? Everyone's trying to get rid of me. I'm like, still here? Yes, I'm still here.
Still here in that regard.
And now I have another show.
but meaning that you're still pushing to do more. You're obviously you're channeled your show into the moral edge, but this is a Bezrat Hashem, a very big project that for years to come will impact a lot of people. And it's just, I respect it a lot. And, you know, for right now, this episode, you know, hopefully people will hear it and understand your story a lot more. And if there's one more question I could ask you, okay?
Yes, sir.
You have no idea what I'm about to ask you.
I do
right?
not.
Is that if there's one message for everyone that's listening to this episode, no matter where they're at in their life, if you could say, this is a message I want you to keep with you in your pocket every day for the rest of your life, what would that be?
I can't speak on behalf of myself. You know, I have in all my albums, you guys know what I believe, what I think. I've said it in my songs. I say it in my videos. My message is consistent. But I will speak on behalf of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe always said that Hashem protects Eretz Yisrael night and day, and that Israel is the safest place in the world. And as someone who's living here almost a decade, I will live and die on that hill. Israel's the safest place in the world, guys. Come home. Wow.
You're the first guest, I think, that has given advice from someone not themselves, but phenomenal piece of advice. And Bezrat Hashem, there's so much more to do. And your story is just phenomenally inspiring. And just to hear everything that you went through and to get, you know, a greater glimpse into who Chanale is, you know, now the people that hopefully they click on this episode, they will want to watch your show more. So obviously plug to that. Well, all the links are in the description. I mean, when they watch us, it's on the same YouTube page. So hopefully you'll see it there. Yeah. And obviously as I start off with a thank you, I just want to end off with a thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to part 2. That is a wrap for this week's episode with myself and Chanale. It was a pleasure sitting down with her. And Bezrat Hashem, you better stay tuned and click subscribe and like because you want to be here for my guest next week. Enjoy. All the best.